The desert doesn't forgive. It swallows stories, hides bones, and erases names. But sometimes, it leaves behind a whisper, a reminder that someone once walked this land and never made it home. In July of 2003, deep in the unforgiving expanse of Pima County, Arizona, the remains of a man were discovered. No ID, no witnesses, no clear cause of death, only fragments of a life, scattered under the burning sun. Who was he? How did he end up here, in one of the most remote corners of the American desert? And why, after all these years, does no one know his name? This is the story of the unknown man of the Arizona desert, a mystery that still haunts investigators. Nearly 2 decades later, it was July 10th, 2003, another blistering summer day in southern Arizona. The kind of day when the air itself seems to shimmer, and every mile of desert feels endless. Somewhere west of Charlie Bell Pass, in Pima County, a discovery was made that would raise more questions than answers. Scattered skeletal remains, lying silent under the weight of years. What little was left told only fragments of a story. A man, likely Hispanic, about 5'7", his life ending far from help, far from anyone who might have known his name. There were no signs of violence that could explain his death, no note, no identification. Just a few personal belongings, 2 pairs of shorts, 1 denim and 1 cargo, and a few pieces of Mexican currency. It was as if the desert had stripped away every trace of who he once was, leaving behind only the question. Why was he here at all? The discovery wasn't dramatic. No search team, no frantic call for help. Just a quiet moment that changed everything. It began when a group of hikers, navigating a lonely stretch of desert west of Charlie Bell Pass, noticed something strange along a dry wash, something pale against the rust-colored earth. At first, it might have looked like animal remains. Out here, that's common. But as they got closer, the truth settled in. These weren't animal bones. Authorities were called, and soon the Pima County Sheriff's Office arrived at the scene. What they found was grim. The remains were scattered, as if time, weather, and wildlife had each taken their turn erasing the man's final chapter. There was no complete skeleton, only fragments, bleached and brittle under the sun. The investigators combed the area carefully, documenting every piece, every clue. Among the bones were worn clothes, jean shorts layered over a pair of cargo shorts, and a few coins from Mexico, faintly corroded by the desert air. There was no sign of a struggle, no weapon, and no shelter nearby. Just silence, a haunting kind of stillness that suggested one thing: this man had likely died alone, and the desert had been his only witness. When the sheriff's team arrived, they knew right away this case would not be simple. There was no obvious crime scene, no footprints, no vehicle, no sign of where the man had come from or how long he'd been there. The desert had done what it always does, stripped the evidence bare. They began with what little they had. The man's clothing, denim shorts layered over cargo shorts, was puzzling. That kind of layering wasn't typical for a hiker, not in this heat, but for someone traveling long distances, especially through the desert, it might have been practical. Alongside the fabric, investigators found a few pieces of Mexican currency. That single detail began shaping the first theory. Perhaps this man was a migrant, someone crossing from Mexico into Arizona, hoping to find work, opportunity, or simply a better life. Many who attempt that journey never make it out of the desert alive. Dehydration, exhaustion, and exposure claim hundreds of lives every year. But even that theory didn't fully fit. The area where he was found, miles off established migrant routes deep in the wilderness, wasn't a common crossing path. Some wondered if he might have been a hiker who lost his way, disoriented by heat and terrain. Still, there were others who weren't convinced. There was something about the location, the condition of the remains, and the absence of personal items that felt off. Could this have been something darker? A victim of foul play, left where no one was supposed to find him? The sheriff's team couldn't say. They gathered the remains, marked the coordinates, and sent everything to the Pima County Forensic Science Center, hoping the bones might tell the story the desert had buried. At the Pima County Forensic Science Center, the remains were examined piece by piece. It was slow, meticulous work, but even in fragments, bones can speak. They tell stories that time can't fully erase. The forensic anthropologist determined the man was likely Hispanic or Latino, around 5'7" in height and between 25 and 40 years old. His teeth were in relatively good condition, but there was something distinctive about them. Shovel-shaped incisors, a trait often seen in individuals of Native American or Latin American ancestry. It was a small clue, but one that gave investigators a direction to start with. With no soft tissue left, identifying him would depend entirely on science, dental records, DNA, and a little luck. The team extracted DNA from the bone samples, entering it into national databases like CODIS and NAMUS, searching for any connection to reported missing persons. They also compared dental charts against countless records across the Southwest, hoping for a match. But nothing came back. No family report, no cross-reference hit. It was as if this man's identity existed outside the system, someone who had vanished without anyone officially noticing. For investigators, that was both heartbreaking and frustrating. Every step forward led to another dead end. The DNA was solid, the dental records clear, yet the man remained nameless. The evidence suggested no trauma, no broken bones, no sign of foul play. But in the desert, nature erases almost everything. Whether he died of dehydration, exposure, or something else entirely, no one could be certain. What they did know was this: whoever he was, his story didn't end neatly. It simply disappeared into the dust. The Arizona desert is both beautiful and merciless. By day, it shimmers under a heat so intense it distorts the horizon. By night, the temperature plummets, and the silence feels endless. For anyone lost out here, it's not just the distance that kills, it's the land itself. Investigators knew that in this environment, time works differently. Within days, the sun can strip flesh, the wind can scatter clothing, and wildlife can move remains far from where death first occurred. Even the sand conspires against memory, slowly covering what it can't destroy. In Pima County alone, hundreds of unidentified remains have been found in the past few decades. Each one tells the same silent story of a person who came here, maybe by choice, maybe by desperation, and never made it out. That's why, for investigators, this case felt like another echo in a long corridor of loss. Every discovery brings hope, the hope that one story might find its ending. But the desert doesn't give up its secrets easily. Maybe the man collapsed under the brutal sun, miles from help. Maybe he got lost, disoriented, and walked until his body couldn't go on. Or maybe his story was darker, an ending written by another person's hand, left to fade beneath the sand. Whatever happened, the desert kept his truth. And even as technology advanced and databases grew, this patch of barren land refused to tell anyone what really happened to the man who died there. As the months passed, investigators pored over every possible lead. The man's DNA profile was solid, extracted, cataloged, and uploaded to NAMUS, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. It was cross-referenced with hundreds of missing persons cases from across the Southwest, from Texas to California. Still, no match. They checked border reports, migrant registries, and even contacted Mexican authorities in hopes of finding a missing person report that might fit his description. But there was nothing. Not a single family waiting for a man his age, height, or region of origin. It was as if he had slipped through every crack in both countries. Forensic anthropologists revisited the remains multiple times, hoping a new technique or fresh eyes might reveal something missed. They looked at bone density, old injuries, dental wear, small details that might narrow down his background or lifestyle. Their findings only deepened the mystery. His bones showed no clear signs of trauma or prolonged illness. He seemed healthy. His teeth indicated he'd had at least some access to dental care, which suggested he wasn't completely destitute. The DNA Doe Project was also consulted, an organization known for using advanced genealogical testing to identify the unknown. But even they couldn't make progress. Either the DNA sample was too degraded, or the man's family simply wasn't in any public database to compare against. Every door investigators opened led back to the same cold corridor. No name, no past, no origin. And so the unknown man of the Arizona desert was added to a growing list of unresolved identities. People whose lives ended quietly, their stories waiting in storage boxes and evidence bags, each one labeled, not with a name but with a number. With no identification and no cause of death, the investigation shifted into speculation. Careful, evidence-based, but speculation nonetheless. Three main theories began to take shape. The first was the most straightforward, that the man was a migrant who became lost during an attempted border crossing. Pima County has long been part of a treacherous migration corridor, one that claims countless lives every year. Many who cross underestimate the desert's size, the distance between water sources, or the brutal heat that can kill in just hours. The Mexican currency in his pocket seemed to fit that theory. Maybe he was part of a group that got separated. Maybe he fell behind, exhausted and dehydrated, and never caught up. But the second theory hinted at something darker. The remoteness of the location, the absence of identification, and the way the remains were scattered all raised quiet suspicion. Could he have been a victim of foul play? Perhaps someone who was brought here intentionally, left to vanish in a place where few ever stumble upon the truth. Investigators searched for bullet casings, signs of struggle, or disturbed soil. But the desert gives nothing freely. Years of wind and erosion can erase all traces of violence. Then came the third, quieter possibility, that his death was simply accidental. Maybe he was a traveler, a hiker, or a drifter who underestimated the landscape. People get lost in the Sonoran Desert every year, even those who think they know it. A wrong turn, a failed compass, a dead phone, and suddenly survival becomes impossible. Each theory had fragments of logic. Each one explained something, but none explained everything. The truth, it seemed, remained buried where the man was found, hidden somewhere between the sand, the silence, and the years that have passed since 2003. It's easy, after so many years, to let this man become just another case number, another John Doe, in an endless list of the unknown. But behind those bones was a life, one that mattered. Somewhere once he was someone's son, maybe someone's brother, someone's friend, someone who laughed, who worked, who dreamed about a future that never came. We often talk about the unidentified as if they exist in a vacuum, but every one of them belonged to a world that has since moved on without answers. Maybe he left home believing he'd return with something better. Maybe he said goodbye to people who still, even today, wonder why he never called, why he never came back. The tragedy of this case isn't only that he died, it is that his story stopped being told. His name, his memories, the small details that made him who he was, all of it erased by the same desert that now holds his remains. And yet the effort to identify him, to give him back that name, is an act of remembrance, a quiet promise that he won't be forgotten completely. Because even when a case goes cold, the human story never really ends. It lingers, waiting for someone to care enough to ask who he was, and why his journey ended alone under the Arizona sun. Years passed, but the file never truly closed. Every few years someone would revisit it, hoping that new technology might finally do what the desert refused to allow: reveal his name. In the 2010s, advances in genealogical DNA testing gave investigators a new tool. The Pima County Office of the Medical Examiner began re-evaluating unidentified remains, including this case. Samples were reprocessed, compared against expanding genetic databases that could trace distant relatives through shared DNA. It was a small hope, but a powerful one. At the same time, online communities started to take notice. Websites like Uncovered.com began compiling unsolved cases, giving forgotten victims a digital presence, a place where strangers could share theories, compare details, or even connect missing persons across borders. For the first time, this man's story wasn't confined to a dusty file in a government archive. It was out there, being seen, being discussed. Investigators also used updated forensic imaging to reconstruct possible facial features based on skull measurements and ethnic indicators. These reconstructions, though imperfect, served one purpose: to help someone, somewhere, recognize him. But even with all these advancements, DNA genealogy, social outreach, digital archives, his identity remains unknown. Every effort brings the world a little closer, yet the final answer still hovers just out of reach. Still, those who work on his case refuse to let it fade. They know that sometimes all it takes is one small detail, one relative's DNA, one memory triggered by a photograph, to bring a lost name home again. The Arizona desert has always been a place of beauty and danger, a vast sunlit graveyard holding thousands of stories that will never be told. Each year more remains are found, and more names are added to the growing list of the unknown. But this man, this one story, stands as a reminder that behind every statistic is a life once full of purpose. He may never have been famous. He may never have had much. But he walked this earth, dreamed of something better, and vanished into the silence, leaving behind only the faintest traces of his existence. His story is a symbol of all those who came before and after him, who crossed deserts, borders, and hardships chasing hope only to disappear. In the end, his silence speaks louder than words. It asks us to remember, not just him but everyone who has been lost to the unforgiving landscape. The unknown man of the Arizona desert remains nameless. But through stories like this, he is not forgotten. If you have any information that could help identify the unknown man of Pima County, even the smallest detail, you can contact the Pima County office of the medical examiner or share what you know through NAMIS. Every piece of information matters, and sometimes it only takes one person to bring a lost name home. What do you think happened out there in the Arizona desert? Was it a tragic accident? Or is there something darker behind his disappearance? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more of America's forgotten mysteries, one unsolved case at a time.